Welcome and thank you for coming to this interview we are conducting with filmmaker Kate Dolan, whose feature film You Are Not My Mother has been recently finished and has been getting great responses in film festivals around the world, and is soon to be released theatrically in Ireland and Britain. And we have Kate here, and we're going to discuss with her the film itself, but also different aspects of her filmmaking career leading up to this point. So thank you for joining us, Kate.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
So just to start kind of from the get-go, what do you think was the defining moment where you decided you wanted to become a filmmaker?
I don't think I can like pin it down to like a moment necessarily. I think it was always just I grew up with my mom and she was a lover of film and watched a lot of films and was a great goer, to the cinema and stuff like that. So it was always just a part of growing up. My grandmother as well. We lived with my grandmother for a while when I was a kid, and she was a real lover of cinema as well. And I watched a lot of classics with her. So I think it was just, I was kind of surrounded by film when I was growing up. And then I loved the idea of it, just like kind of creating stories. And I always loved kind of making up stories and monsters and all that kind of stuff. So it just started to kind of slot together. When I was 11, so I'd saved all my communion money and my confirmation money, and my mom was very trying to make me keep it for as long as possible, but she then gave in eventually, and I allowed me to buy a camera, which I still have actually. It's up there. It's like a old high tape camera. And I bought that when I was like 12, and then I think from that point on, as much as she tried to discourage me, I think it was just like a path heading straight to that kind of career, probably.
So, at this early age, were there any particular films or filmmakers that inspired you that you particularly took an interest in, do you think?
Yeah, I think one of my earliest memories is watching The Shawshank Redemption with my mom. So that was probably when I was about 6 or 7, and I think just like some of the images from that film really stand out in my mind, like seeing them at that time, like when he crawls through the pipe at the end of the movie to escape and the rain's kind of coming down. It was very I just remember seeing it and just thinking, like, because at age 6 or 7 you've not really seen that many films that would have that kind of you know cinema to them, if you know what I mean. So that was a real kind of one that stuck with me. And then yeah, I also love Stand By Me. My granny showed me that when I was a kid as well. And then like all the kind of Spielberg movies, I obviously was a big fan of Jurassic Park because it kind of came out at the time when dinosaurs were the best thing in the world for a kid, for me. Um, so yeah, then when I kind of figured out who Steven Spielberg was, I watched all his kind of movies, and my mom let me watch Jaws and Close Encounters, all that kind of stuff, the ones that I had missed before. So yeah, Spielberg obviously, and then as I got a bit older, probably branching out to the kind of more horror filmmakers, Kubrick, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I hate to say it's like one filmmaker is one that I love. I think it's very kind of mixed, eclectic bunch that have informed, influenced me over the years.
So, you touched upon there horror films, and I think this is something that's very interesting because um, sometimes horror is seen as a good starting point for a filmmaker, but also there are filmmakers who actually have like an actual love of horror cinema. So would you say that rather than it just being a sort of a, a way of getting to make a feature film, you've always had like a love of and an interest in horror cinema?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always been like ever since I was a kid, I've loved anything kind of spooky or scary, or you know even in books. And I was reading kind of Goosebumps as a kid, and then Stephen King and Shirley Jackson and all that kind of stuff. So it was, anything kind of remotely scary I wanted to explore and understand, and books about ghosts and monsters and all that kind of stuff. Like I loved all that kind of thing. Um so yeah, it just kind of was a natural progression then to like when I was old enough to kind of actually watch the scary films, that then I started doing that all the time. So yeah, no, I have a great respect for the genre. I love it. I think it's such a, you know, interesting genre for a filmmaker, because you can really get really creative and imaginative and let your imagination run wild and kind of create things that in other genres you might not necessarily get to do. And I think as well it's a great way to explore themes that, in a drama film might be too confronting for an audience or hard to watch for an audience. But if you have a monster representing those themes, or a ghost or whatever it might be, whatever vehicle you use, it's more palatable for an audience, and that it can be more mainstream, so your story gets seen and viewed by more people, so it's appealing in that way too, I think.
So from your young age and teenage years, how did you go from their filmmaking being of an interest to actually something where it was turning into a career where you wanted to do it as a living?
Yeah, well, I when I finished school, I to the dismay of my guidance counselor, I'd only put film courses on my CAO. So they were kind of like, "Why don't you put business down as well?" And I was like, I would have no interest in doing that." So I was very determined. I very one track mind in terms of that. So, you know, I'm not the kind of person who has a plan B. So it was kind of like plan A or nothing. So yeah, I went to IADT. I got into the film school there, which was great. So I went there straight after school, and then obviously there they set you up really well to kind of start working when you leave. Like I did a minor in editing in college, so I had the kind of skill set to be editing videos when I left college as well. So you have skills. You can't be a director as soon as you leave school, but
Hmm.
you can do other things and work in the industry in different ways. So I just started doing that. I actually got a job in an advertising agency then. The prize of a competition was to be an intern at an ad agency. So I did that for a while. Because at the time it was like kind of bad recession when I graduated from college. So it was still kind of difficult to get work. But I got that internship, and then that, I got in that job, I worked in, it's advertising, so it's not miles away. So you still get to kind of learn about how ads work and how those are made and put together and go on shoots for those and that kind of thing. So, um, yeah, but it wasn't until I left that job then I finally kind of made another film, which was called Little Doll, which I was self-funded. But then that film played at the Berlinale, so that was kind of like when I played at Berlinale. That was kind of the moment I went, okay, maybe this will work out. But I still wasn't sure, and still am sure.
So yeah, so well, that's a great place to start, the Berlinale. And were you there at that festival? Did you attend?
Yeah, so that was in 2016. And it was, yeah, self-funded short, so it was kind of, we raised money on Indiegogo, me and the producer, and made it with just a bunch of friends for like literally nothing. And we were very lucky then, it played at the Berlinale. And through that then Screen Ireland were obviously in attendance at the Berlinale, so that was kind of their first, like, before that they didn't have a clue who I was or what I was doing. But then once you kind of have that to your name and you say, "Oh,
Mhm.
look at me here," then you get noticed. And then through that I got funding for my next short film, which I got through Screen Ireland funding, because they kind of then knew who I was. That film was called Cat Calls, which we shot in 2017, so it's like following year after Berlinale.
Mhm. So Little Dolls is a drama, whereas Catcalls is like a horror film. So, but it's a horror film that deals with issues that are very much topical and relevant and still ongoing. So, you mentioned earlier how horror can maybe deal with subjects that are true to life, but in a way that's less confrontational as if it was a straight drama. So, in terms of your film, could you maybe just give a little bit of kind of an idea of what that was about the film was about, and uh, what your message was with that film?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to make like a horror short film, and as a woman, there's a lot of kind of daily horrors in your life. People following you home and that kind of thing that happened to you in reality. So I wanted to make something about that, kind of just like the experience of being a woman in the world in a horror short. But I was trying to figure out what the story was, and I knew I wanted to make something that had kind of a monster element. So that, the idea that this woman who is prey then becomes a predator, and then the predator becomes the prey. So there's like a reversal. So I knew I wanted to do that, but I was trying to find the right way to tell the story. And when you've got like 10 minutes max to tell that story, it's hard to kind of pin it down how to do that. So I was working on it, and then me and my friend were walking home one night, and uh, a man pulled in and asked us for directions, but then he like exposed himself to us. And then we happened to get his license plate number when he was driving away. So then the guards went to his house after, and what they said when they got there, the guy burst into tears, and he was like crying. And I found that really interesting, just that like he had been so frightening to us when it happened, and then an hour later, when the police called to his house, he's like a blubbering mess. And so Cat Calls was obviously then taking that story, but the girls in the short film, they become these kind of cat monsters, and spoiler, but they like basically follow him back to his house and they kill him. So it was kind of just a way to tell that story in a more fun kind of camp way, because I think like obviously what happened is horrible, and if that happens in a drama film, it's hard to watch. It might be hard to watch, but I think when you have cat monsters running around, it's maybe a little bit more fun and exciting. So yeah, that was kind of, it felt like a no-brainer to use that story to tell to make the short that I wanted.
So, and I gather that got some good festival play as well. What kind of experiences did you witness on the festival circuit when it was playing?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like, because Little Doll played Berlinale, which is a huge festival and amazing. But after Berlinale, we didn't play that many festivals. There was like, a fair few, but they were all kind of smaller. And then, it peters out and then you move on to the next thing. But Catcalls was kind of amazing because it was a horror short, it was this whole new world that I hadn't really been aware of in the festival circuit of horror film festival, so genre festival. So Fantasia and Fantastic Fest. Fantasia is in Montreal, Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas, Sitges, which is in Spain, a huge genre festival. So these, I hadn't really been to any of these or had experience of these before, even though I love horror very much, just because I hadn't made anything horror before. And the audiences there are really, really invested, and they go to see the shorts. Their shorts are really well attended as well. And actually, through playing at some of those bigger genre festivals, I had all these like US managers reaching out to me who wanted to represent me in the US. And it was kind of like bizarre because with Little Doll I hadn't had anything like that, but I think it was just the reach of the film in the genre space is so much more because it's more niche, I suppose, in a way. In a drama festival like Berlinale, one short is a tiny fish in this huge pond. Whereas I think in the horror space, those festivals are more curated and smaller, and there's more of an audience maybe to your film. So yeah, it was great. And then Catcalls, after even we got the film was put on Shudder, which is like a horror streaming platform for a while, and it's on YouTube. But on YouTube, it has almost 1 million views or something like that. And it's kind of, I think because horror has such an audience and people type in like horror short film to watch on YouTube, then, it just like kind of has this amazing audience, much more so than you would have with a drama film. So that was like Catcalls did amazingly well for us. It was kind of unbelievable in a way.
Hmm. So you go from there, and you've since done a feature film, which is You're Not My Mother. So I believe it was funded through the Screen Ireland POV production scheme. So could you maybe give some um, details about how it went? You went from following that short to doing this feature film, and maybe like how that happened basically to come to that point.
Yeah, so um we made Catcalls in 2017, and then it was kind of played all the festivals in 2018. And towards the end of 2018, so Screen Ireland used to do a scheme called Catalyst, which was basically the POV scheme, which you just mentioned, but before it was it kind of focused towards female filmmakers that year that they wanted to do. So I knew of it, and I knew great filmmakers like Lorcan Finnegan, who made his first feature film on that scheme, and lots of other filmmakers, and great films had come out of it. So I knew it was a great way to kind of get your first feature done. Um, and so I knew they were kind of coming up with this new scheme, and I knew then that through the grapevine, people said, oh, it's going to be focused towards female writer directors this time. So it felt like a kind of a prime time, because I had just done catcalls with Screen Ireland, so they knew me and I had a good relationship with them, and I wanted to make a horror feature. So yeah, we just kind of I had been in meeting with Dee Levens, who works for Fantastic Films, which they do a lot of horror films in Ireland. And we were wanting to work together on something. And she had seen Cackles. So we were kind of talking about that. And then she said, well, do you have an idea we could put in for this POV scheme? And I had a very rough kind of few ideas. She was kind of drawn to this one that would become You Are Not My Mother. Um, and it was like a 1 page thing at that time, and then it was like 3 weeks before the deadline, and she was like, okay, let's go for it with this idea. You need to do a 10-page treatment and have it done but in like 3 weeks time. um so I very hurriedly tried to get that done, and then we submitted it, and we got the next stage. So that was kind of a development stage where they paired us with script editor and to kind of get the script written, and then they picked 4 projects based on the kind of script you delivered, I believe, was the kind of how it worked. But yeah, no, it was amazing. It was just like such a great initiative, and although the budget's quite punishing and hard to make a film on, I think it's great because Screen Ireland are your only financier, so they were very hands off and just let us make a film. So it was, as a first time filmmaker, it's a great way to do your first film because you had a lot of creative control over everything, which was really nice.
So one thing I really thought was strong in your feature was your cast. I thought the actors were wonderful, particularly uh, the two main teenage girls. So first of all, maybe could you maybe say something about how you came to cast those actors, but also your working relationship with them, because film schools can often be very technical, whereas something about kind of dealing with personalities, directing actors, sometimes that can be something that's a more personal thing to develop, if that makes any sense. So first, like the practicality of finding those actors, and maybe then your working relationship with them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first, obviously, because Shar is the protagonist of our film, is like the whole film's through that POV of that protagonist. So we needed a really strong actor to play Shar, who could, because she basically had to be in every scene and, deliver a very complex performance without much dialogue as well. So I had seen a film called Cunis by Tristan Hinu, and Hazel was in that film. And she gave a very quiet, very powerful, emotional performance in that short. And I had seen that, and I just knew I just kind of knew that she'd be right for the lead. So we set up a call with her agent, and I kind of had a Zoom with her after she had read the script, and she just really loved it. And I think that like broke the ice immediately because she really got it. You know, the film obviously has a lot of kind of witchcraft and paganism and folk horror elements to it. So I think she just was really into all that and like got it, and was a very kind of witchy individual, so she was very much excited and enthusiastic about being a part of the film, which that's the first hurdle, I think, is like if somebody's excited about it, then immediately you kind of have a partner in crime who will help you through it. And then we started to cast kind of down from Hazel, because once we had her, we kind of created the family around her. And yeah, I'm the kind of person, I don't, it's very important to me that I get along well with anybody I'm working with. I don't like anyone who takes themselves too seriously or kind of, looks down on the horror genre as well. I wanted people to be earnestly excited and involved on what we were doing, and I didn't want to have to kind of justify myself to anybody. So anytime I was casting, I think it was just like from a real good instinct place of, are you going to be excited about this, and be a kind of a teammate, a partner to have. And I think all the cast we got were absolutely that, and they were so amazing. So then it makes your on set relationship very easy, because they're if they're the kind of person you'd be happy to go for a coffee with, or hang out with outside of the set as well, so that everyone got along really well in that way, and there was no kind of difficult personalities, I think, on set, because we had chosen people we knew would be part of the team, I suppose.
Well, yeah, because it's a with a low budget film, people having a passion for the project and everyone getting on well, I'd imagine it is a very helpful thing.
Yes, yeah.
So, to, to go actually onto that, because of the low budget, did you find that while on one hand, obviously, having a low budget can be very stressful and trying at times, but on the other hand, in terms of kind of prepping and the actual filming, did you find it made you more focused, more precise about what you were going to go for?
Definitely, yeah. I think we knew even from when we were submitting that first treatment to this, like, as I was writing the treatment and even writing the script, I was writing it knowing it that it was going to be made on this scheme. So it was like any kind of, even the writing process, the producer had to kind of get me to put back in some of the more challenging set pieces, like the bonfire at the end, because
Mhm.
I was initially kind of afraid we wouldn't be able to pull it off on the budget. Um, but I think, yeah, we were always trying to keep that in the forefront of our mind, because we didn't want to overstretch ourselves. Like, even a couple of months before shooting, a few months before shooting, COVID was kind of around, so we knew we were going to be delayed for a while. I actually cut about 10 pages out of the script, because we were chatting to first ADs, and the first was kind of saying, like, doing this in 22 days is going to be impossible at 106 pages, so you need to cut it down. Otherwise, we just won't be able to do it. So, we were always kind of really aware of that. And with the DOP as well, even the shooting style, like, we knew we couldn't get a steady cam. We knew we couldn't get kind of fancy tracks for things. So we just made sure that to kind of achieve the style we wanted, that we just kind of thought about how to do those shots in a more creative way that would be different. Then we couldn't rely on the gear to give us what we wanted, so we'd kind of have to think about it a bit more. So me and the DP, even when we got the house location, we went there and walked around the house and went through the script, and every scene in the script in the house, we took photos, like a photo storyboard for every scene of, because the house was quite small, even though it was big enough to move around in. Like, there's not only so many ways you can shoot the person sitting in this chair. So it's kind of like I was blocking the scenes in my head before we were even like anywhere near shooting, because we needed to just know that we could get a scene that would cut together in our tiny room and it would work. Um, so yeah, there was a lot of prep, just like making sure that we knew exactly what we were doing going in. And of course, then when you're super prepared, then it allows you can throw those things a little bit out the window when you get on set, because you have a backup plan for one that will definitely work, so you can kind of try things if you have the time. So yeah, it was it was difficult, but I think it wasn't actually the team were great. Like Narian, the DOP was really great, and the production design team were amazing. Even though we had such tiny budget, like just really kind of everyone tried to make everything work as much as they could.
And something which we obviously covered already with the short film, uh, Cat Call saying about how we were able to, you were able to take dramatic real life situations but turn them into sort of a fantastical story. Um, what's really interesting about your feature is, on one hand, it's set in a very kind of gritty urban environment, but it tells a fantastical supernatural story. And also how at one point there's a certain presumption that the unusual behavior of the mother character is potentially down to mental health issues. But obviously, as the film develops, that's not the case. It's something fantastical, supernatural. So there's a kind of a fine line there between sort of a folk horror story, but also like an urban horror story. So could you maybe just speak for a moment about kind of in the creative process, kind of almost melding two quite different styles of storytelling into one story?
Yeah, I think that the folk horror thing is interesting because I think in Irish history, like obviously we've such a rich folklore and kind of myth and legend and um all that kind of aspect of our culture is so interesting to me. And I read lots about that when I was writing the script. And for me growing up, I grew up in North Dublin, very like kind of urban environment, and hanging out in town as a teenager and that kind of thing. And like it didn't make the stories that my grandmother told me about, like, folklore any less real that I was in an urban setting. So, it was always funny to me that like in folk horror, it's always in a very rural place, and it's on the kind of, in the woods or in a very isolated town. And I suppose I just wanted to see those elements of our Irish kind of folk history but in an urban setting, if you know what I mean, because I feel like they're pervasive in like all parts of Ireland. Even in the kind of cityscape, you can still feel that. And even kind of looking at the urban sprawl of Dublin, like the way the city expands out into those places that once were countryside, and they were once maybe sacred spaces, or that a whole idea of like fairy mounds, that you can't build roads, you have to build the road around the fairy mound and stuff like that. I always found all that really interesting. So I just, for me, it was creating a sense of place that, maybe once was sacred, but it's built, like all these kind of housing estates are over it now. And it's like, how do those two interact, the urban and the kind of myth and legend of the past? So yeah, that was a really interesting thing to me. But I love kind of urban legend, like horror as well, like kind of folk horror in the urban space, like Candyman, like from 1992. Um, I think that's really interesting. So yeah, and I think I just wanted to see Dublin depicted, North Dublin particularly depicted in a way that was different than I'm used to seeing it, because I'm from here, and like I feel like when you see North Dublin on screen, a lot of the time it's drug dealers, or like this or that, or kind of poverty porn. And I was, it's very different than my upbringing in North Dublin, is like, which was more about kind of ghosts and witches and stuff like that. So I wanted to bring that to the screen, I suppose. Not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah, no, no, exactly, because
yeah.
that's and also that you were saying there how when films depicting, say, North Dublin or any similar urban environment, there can be a poverty porn aspect. Whereas going in, I was wondering, was that what I was going to see? And it wasn't. It was that wasn't going on with your film. So, uh, well done for that, because it's something that seems to be very easy for some filmmakers to fall into. Whereas I think the film, as fantastical as it is in terms of the supernatural elements, does have a kind of a lived-in quality where the characters feel like they're from that area and that area has a history. Um, so it's not just like someone's just been parachuted in for a story of
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That was important to me, I think, as well. Because like I think it's funny, a few people have said it to me about it, but like like a lot of the locations are places where I hung out when I was a young person, and like a lot of like some of the places are really near where I went to school and where I where I grew up, and so yeah, it's kind of I was just depicting my world a little bit. So I didn't think it was ever gonna feel disingenuous, I suppose, because it's like taken from a very genuine place.
Um, so the film has been playing on the festival circuit, and as mentioned already, it'll be soon to be released theatrically in the UK and Ireland. But what has the response been so far on from festivals in regards to the film?
Yeah, it's been like, as I said, like the film was made for very little, and a lot of the people on the crew and cast, like it was their first features and stuff like that. So, it was a real labor of love, and everyone's just trying to like make this film and do their best. So our expectations weren't like overly high about what we were going to achieve in terms of festivals. But then we had our premiere at TIFF Midnight Madness, which, Toronto Film Festival is like a massive international film festival, and in North America, one of the biggest ones. And the Midnight Madness program is something that I've always looked to as a young filmmaker. Like when I was in college, if a film was in the Midnight Madness program of like Sundance or TIFF, you were kind of looking out for them. As a horror lover, like I would be always kind of tracking that to see what kind of cool movies were coming out. So when we found that out, I was just like overwhelmed. It was such an amazing thing. And then the reviews we got from that screening were really positive, and the audience response was really positive. So it was a great way to start the journey. And since then, yeah, we've had an overwhelming positive reaction to the film, which is really, really nice. Because as I said, we didn't have like big expectations of what we would achieve with the low budget and everything. So, yeah, we just won a prize at the Gérard May Fantastic Film Festival, which is a kind of genre film festival in France. And just this weekend, we found out we won a prize at the Boston Sci-Fi Film Festival, and our film was playing there as well, which is another kind of genre festival in America. So it's just kind of mad. It's kind of as well. It's hard for you, I think, as a filmmaker sometimes to see the film as other people see it, because especially if you've written it as well. It's just like you can't see the wood from the trees. Basically, it's kind
Mhm.
of like I don't know if it's good or bad. I can't give an objective opinion because I just there's too much kind of there. So it's always nice when other people seem to really like it and like get it and enjoy it.
So that's all wonderful, and congrats on the response to the film and for the quality of the film, of course. But just before we finish up, is there anything you would give as advice or anything like that for any filmmakers or people wanting to go to become filmmakers? Any advice you would give them when starting out in regards to, well, two things, I suppose. On one hand, there's maybe a practical thing you can think of, but also just maybe a creative bit of advice as well, in terms of a creative thing, in terms of a career, but also maybe just some sort of little aspect create in terms of creating something that you would maybe give as advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think practically it's always great to have other skills. I think if you want to be a writer director, absolutely go for that, and keep that in your sights, and don't kind of I feel like when I went to college, the first day we were there, they said hands up who wants to be a director, and everyone in the room put their hand up. And then the lecturer said something like, okay, well, like probably like two of you are actually gonna do that. And it's really disheartening. And I feel like when you're like, I want to be a director, I want to be a writer, like um you come up a lot against a lot of people who are going to say like, oh, that's a bit far-fetched now, maybe like dampen your hopes or whatever. And I think don't, like, just I think the one of the biggest things that keeps you going is just like, if you in your head are like, that's what I'm doing and I'm going to do it, and you just push yourself to do that, like determination, just sticking with it, because it takes a long time for it to all kind of start to come together. But when it does, then you've done it, and it's like really exciting. So I think it's easy to get discouraged, but maybe just stick with it and believe in yourself. That's really cheesy, but I think that's true. And then I think also just practically just have other skills. If you want to be a writer director, like for me, learning editing in college, and then I worked in the art department a lot on feature films and commercials and all that kind of stuff as well. So just kind of having skills in other departments that you can then be on set and learn by looking at other directors working, and all that kind of stuff is really important to just broaden your horizons about who comes in to make a film, all the things that come to make a film, or a commercial or whatever it is. So just getting experience on set and just seeing how it all comes together is really important. And then I think, also just I think I was stymied a lot by my own need for things to be perfect. Like when I was writing scripts, I would kind of write them for months and months and months and months and months. And it's still something I struggle with, I think, is just letting your mistakes be in that first draft. So, finish the first draft and it's not going to be perfect. Your first draft's going to be the worst draft of the script and it's only going to get better from there. And I think don't try and like not send somebody something because you don't feel it's perfect. Like I think if somebody offers to read something for you and give you notes, that's great, and just do that. And it doesn't have to be the perfect draft of a script. So, don't hold yourself back and wait a year to make a movie because you feel like it's not the perfect draft of the film. Just go out and do something and make it, because I think when you've got something made, that's like one little notch on your belt that gets you to the next step. So don't try and hold yourself back from those steps forward, and just just keep an eye on your kind of perfectionist attitudes if you have them. And what else? I think those are kind of like my main advice. I think don't be scared of relying on those people around you on set. I think I used to kind of have a real belief that as a writer director, I kind of had to have every answer and know exactly what I wanted from everything. But I think it really makes you freer if you can turn around and say, like, I actually don't know what that is yet. And then you can like have your kind of HODs, like your DOP or your production designer or an actor, then bring in an idea and they say, well, what about this? That could work. And then you go, yeah, actually, that's a brilliant idea. Because like those people are skilled in their craft. They know what they're doing. They are artists in their own right as well. So letting other people bring in ideas to stuff. Don't be too protective of your work, even if you've written it as well. I think ideas that other people have are often better than your own, or like sometimes they are. So I think just like be open to those ideas, and it doesn't make you less of a director, a good director. It makes you probably a much better director, because like films are collaborative. So that's like a really important thing, to collaborate with people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this, Kate. Just before we finish, could you give us some details about the forthcoming release if people want to see the film?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting a theatrical release in Ireland from the 4th of March. That probably will be a bit limited. It probably won't be like every cinema in Ireland, but hoping to know more about where it's going to be from the 4th of March soon. But kind of most kind of the art housey cinemas around Ireland will definitely have it anyway. Um, and then the film is going to be released in the US from the 25th of March, and on US VOD, so video on demand, YouTube and stuff like that, from the 25th. And then it's getting a UK release, small theatrical, from the 8th of April. And then it will be on video on demand for UK and Ireland from the 8th of April too. So you can rent it on, iTunes or YouTube, Google Play, that kind of stuff. And that's where you can watch it.
Okay. Thank you
Cool.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thanks a million.